You are listening to the Enormocast.
Hello, welcome to the Enormocast ASMR feed. On today's installment, we're zipping into the Arc'teryx Alpha SV jacket, made from the most advanced fabric known to humankind. 100D Gore-Tex Pro EPE. What do all those letters mean? They mean you're going to feel safe, warm, and dry in this jacket, silly. Here we go. First arm in. Second arm in. And now you're settling into a forced bivvy, only because your partner was up late watching YouTube videos of knuckleheads free soloing 5/9s, and he missed his 3 a.m. alarm. Now it's night again. But it's okay. You're swaddled in your Arc'teryx Alpha SV with Gore-Tex Pro EPE. Let's zip it up and shut out those nasty elements. That feels better, doesn't it? Uh-oh, what's this? Are those dark existential thoughts starting to creep in? Dread? Fear? Now, don't forget that your Arc'teryx Alpha SV has a low-profile reflector hidden in the hood brim to improve your searchability in emergency situations just like this one. So settle in, because Arc'teryx and the Alpha SV has your back, and the rest of your body too, cradled in its little dinosaur arms, or wings, or whatever they were. In the morning, when you wake up refreshed and ready to get the hell off this thing, your first thought will be, I gotta pee real bad. But your second thought will be that the Alpha SV jacket and all Arc'teryx apparel is available at Arc'teryx.com or your local shop. Sleep tight, and don't let the cold wind bite.
Do you have an unreformed dirtbag in your life? One who lived in a truck for years, but now that they have a roof, their own internet password, and maybe even a 401k, they still pinch pennies like it's the crux hold of their 2-year project. Maybe they still boast a cracked travel mug that they found outside the shitter in Indian Creek, surveilling it for 2 days to make sure it was up for grabs before throwing it into their kit unwashed and unrepentant. Well, this holiday season, it's our sworn duty to get those skin-flinty friends something they secretly covet but would never buy of their own accord. That's where Yeti comes in. The simple gift-giving options of the Yeti Rambler stainless coffee mugs go from espresso to jug of joe, even, Lord Almighty, the dirtbag Holy Grail, the Rambler ceramic-lined French press. Customize it with an Enormocast sticker and your former dumpster dweller will lose their goddamn mind. Or how about a Yeti Yonder water bottle to replace the PermaStink bottle they left in the haul bag for 5 months after coming home from the valley? So check out the plethora of gift ideas, many under $50 at Yeti.com, or go big and completely crush them with a new Tundra cooler. Your call, but you're probably still going to have to wrestle them for that busted-up icebox they found on the side of I-70 6 winters ago. Just let it go, bud. It had a good run.
Listen, where are you playing in town? You playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
big
big
house. We
place
sold it
outside
out.
of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold it out.
20,000
seats.
You really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed traveling with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Good weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by La Sportiva
Arc'teryx Equipment.
and with support from Maxim Ropes. Maxim has been keeping the Enormocast off the deck since 2012.
And now, we can also thank the chill folks at Yeti. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is November 26th, 2025, about 7:30 here in Colorado, and this is episode 316 of the Enormocast, a conversation with alpinist Chantel Astorga. So many emails and messages and DMs and everything else over the last couple of years to get this one done. Finally, face-to-face up in Banff. Very excited to have Chantel on. And before we get to that interview, I do want to thank the folks at the Banff Mountain Film Festival for having me up there again this year, second year in a row. Also, thank you to the Banff Center in general for the hospitality. It feels good to have an organization like the Mountain Film Festival kind of legitimize what I do here at the Enormocast, to place it amongst their reverence for books and for films, to place podcasting in there is a cool thing. And I've been very honored that they've asked me to come up there for a couple of years. I got a couple sit-down interviews, this one here with Chantel, and also a live interview, all with alpinists. So if you alpinists ever feel like you are being neglected, shut your mouth, because here I am serving up some really cool interviews on a plate just for you. And you don't actually have to go to the festival to see these films. You can get some of that Banff love as it tours the country, as the Banff Film Festival tours the country. So that'll be happening next year, 2026. Go to banffcenter.ca for information, or keep an eye out in your community. And that's center, spelled the Canadian way, eh? Okay, trying to get this one out right before Thanksgiving, just in case you need something to do after your extended relatives have peppered you with questions about Mount Everest and about free climbing without a rope. And do you do that kind of stuff, honey? And don't you think it's dangerous? And all those other things. For me, it's like, are you still doing that climbing stuff you used to do? You know, and they may not say it, but the look in their eyes is like, aren't you a little old for that? But now they've all started to fall asleep on the couch watching football. And you're checking to see if the climbing gym's open today. And maybe, just maybe, you can drop into an Enormocast. And this one's a good one. Chantel Astorga is an alpinist. Her feats in the Alaska range, I think, are what got her noticed initially, but she's climbed all over the world. She has a wonderful origin story, growing up in Salt Lake and finding a magazine that set her on her path. She's an artist. She was a skater. She's dabbled in mountain biking. She's an avalanche forecaster, was a ski patroller, and mostly she was just very self-determined. She seems to have made some decisions about how she was going to live her life and went after it. Chantel has ducked the spotlight a bit for many, many years, funding her climbing through a job as an avalanche forecaster in Idaho for about 14 years. But she's finally decided to accept some recognition for the things that she's done in the climbing realm and is now on the North Face team. I believe she has a sponsorship from Black Diamond, maybe some others. Well earned, and she deserves it. Very down to earth, very up for adventure, and a very interesting woman. So I hope you enjoy this one. It was a long time coming. It was a long time coming. She doesn't love talking about herself, but I think she did a great job here. Let's get to an interview with Chantel Astorga. As many of you know, some years ago, the Enormocast proposed starting a crag to gym movement where we would convince outdoor climbers to head indoors en masse. Theoretically, it would leave the crags empty, so the royal we could flail our petty egos against the indifferent walls in peace. While that idea never really took off, each winter the crag to gym migration happens naturally as the snow falls, the cold winds blow, and crag packs are zipped up for the last time in the face of cold, dry firing so painful you want to puke. And though for some it might feel like a compromise, Sportiva wants you to make the most of your indoor climbing with several gym-specific climbing shoes. Because, well, those blown-out TC Pros you've been hammering all year might not cut it on the greasy jibs of the steep blue problem that's now haunting your dreams. The Sportiva Solution Comp, the Theory, and the crowning Andra Comp will never do you dirty when it comes to plastic pulling. All designed for the vagaries of indoor climbing, they grab, toe hook, heel hook, and finally somehow just stick to the most chalk-encrusted, greased-out holds known to humankind. And of course, the boards love them too. So don't just bide your time indoors, thrive in the gym with new kicks for plastic from Sportiva.com or your local gym pro shop. And maybe, just maybe, you'll start taking it seriously enough to send that awkward pink one in the corner before they strip the wall to set for that kids comp next weekend. Why are you here? Why are you at Banff?
Yeah, Banff. I'm here for a panel discussion about the future of alpinism. Yeah. And then somewhere along the line, I got cornered by you after years of you trying to hunt me down. But here we are in person. So,
well, I'd like to say that your first mistake was saying yes, which you did say yes.
Yeah.
And then, we kind of wanted to do face-to-face. We kind of had some things set up, and you were going to maybe be in Carbondale and then maybe not. And so, but yeah, here we are.
Yeah, face-to-face is definitely better though.
Yeah. And it's really nice to meet you. I just met you the other night.
Yeah, likewise.
And it's funny because we have enough mutual friends that we kind of, I think, feel like we probably should have met by now.
Yeah.
And I know that this weekend for me is like a little bit like interviews of reluctant guests. So you're just well in line with that.
Good. Yeah.
But yeah, I've been learning about speed climbing lately.
Okay.
The one that's out currently is with Kate Callaghan, who along with Laura Pinu did the triple.
Yeah.
Became the first women to do the triple crown in Yosemite. And I've gone deep in the weeds with her about speed climbing in Yosemite. And it's even her and I were remarking about how different what they are doing now is from like the previous eras.
Okay.
Because they like talked to Timmy O'Neill about doing the triple with Dean, and it was just like basically those guys kind of woke up one day and said, let's do this. And then now there's less like these data sheets, literally like spreadsheets and all this knowledge.
Oh, no way.
But then I remember just recently, because I think of you as this alpinist, these feats up in Alaska and things like that are kind of what dominate your story at this point. But you started you were in this era of speed climbing with the kind of former push about, a little over a decade ago with Libby Sauter and Quinn Brett and Mayan Smith Gobad and Josie McKee, all this like group of women that were hammering. You were right in there. You were a record holder. So let's talk about getting to that point and in those days. We're not quite at the beginning of your life, but it's going back a few years.
Yeah.
Like, how'd you end up in Yosemite?
You kind of have to start at the beginning of life a little bit, but to skip over that, my good friend Mad Dog, who his real name's Dana Drummond, but really we just know him by Mad Dog. He was somebody I was ski patrolling with at Snowbird, and he was working on the search and rescue team in the valley as well. And I was still like a fairly new rock climber. I mean, I had a little bit of like time under my belt, but I just decided to go out to the valley one summer. I was going to visit him, camp there, but just try to figure that scene out a little bit. And yeah, funny enough, I like drove into Yosemite Valley for my first time. Of course, I knew about like El Cap and, everything. And somehow I came in through the El Portel entrance, drove through the valley loop and missed El Cap on my way in. I don't know how, but I got to Camp 4 and I found Mad Dog and, or maybe I saw somebody before that, but I was just like, where is El Cap? Like, and they were like, well, do you live under a rock? Like, how did you like miss it? And so ended up riding bikes out to El Cap Meadows. And then I was like, oh my God, how did I?
It is.
Yeah. It's like, whoa,
that's awesome. Yeah, that's hard. It's hard to miss. But
yeah,
actually that reminds me is that I don't have the whole story of the Winona Tunnel either.
Okay.
Because when I came in, it was completely socked in, and it was socked in for a couple days. So I was there for a couple days before. I kind of knew where it was supposed to be, but literally I couldn't see like 100 feet off the deck.
Yeah.
So yeah, I didn't have my grand Winona Tunnel entrance moment either.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that's pretty funny.
Yeah.
What years were you at Snowbird?
That was 2004 through 2010.
Okay.
Yeah, and I ended up just spending a good part of that summer between the valley and Tuolumne, and then back in the valley like in the early fall. Definitely the hot period, but it's quieter, and I was very much like a 5'8", 5'9" valley climber, and just trying to tick off the classics and figure it out. And And then, yeah, somehow along the line, like, well, before I felt like I deserved it, I ended up getting on the search and rescue team in the Valley, which ultimately, like, sort of shifted my perspective on things. And, but it was also, yeah, just kind of a difficult transition into that, feeling like I was surrounded by incredibly talented people, and then also just being like, how did I get here? 'Cause I'm not like what these people are, you know? And so, yeah, that was kind of the beginning of like sort of the focus on more wall climbing as opposed to like being a really strong valley free climber, because that seemed like more of my weakness, whereas like the wall climbing like seemed like there were going to be more strengths there, and I just needed to feel like I belonged there, I guess, in a sense, you know?
Right.
Because I was in my early 20s at the time too, so it was kind of, yeah, I was just like, how can I get there the quickest to like feeling like I deserve to be here or whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you say that, because when you said that you got on, like, didn't deserve it but got on the SAR team, I'm like, of course you did. You were a ski patroller, so you had all this, you know, you had all this first responder knowledge that would go with that. And so you're missing a climbing element.
Yeah, but that's a big deal, right? With that, like, I mean,
Yeah.
historically that team was like, the history is incredible, and the talent is usually very high.
Sure.
And so you're kind of comparing yourself to like the people of the past, like people like Bridwell, and, you know, and then all the people leading up to the modern days.
But then it snowballed. I mean, it wasn't just that one summer.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. That was the first summer. But it was the next summer, I believe, actually 2 summers later, that I was, you know, living on the SAR site. So,
all right, well, talk about getting into this speed game, and you know, and going for records and things like that. You
know, of course, I started climbing El Cap just in standard sort of aid climbing style, like going up there, figuring it out. My first climb on El Cap was triple direct with this guy Mash. Maybe you know him. Quite a character, but
I don't. But I do know Dana. I do know Mad Dog.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Our ears crossed.
He's a good dude. But yeah, so Mash kind of like took me under his wing, and, you know, he'd probably climbed the triple direct like 100 times, and we got stuck in a snowstorm up there, so kind of got the full experience. And then after I got down, I was just like super jacked about it. And my first year on SAR, I was like, okay, I'm gonna go climb the Zodiac. And Libby Sauter it was also her first year on SAR, and we were kind of in a similar place, like being on the search and rescue team, and that she had like a broader background in highlining, and she grew up climbing, so she obviously had a good foundation there, but she'd never climbed El Cap. And it was kind of like, okay, like, you have to climb El Cap to be on the SAR team, right? At a minimum is what was kind of the expectation and was. And so I was originally going to climb it with a different friend, Sako. She got hurt, and then I was looking for somebody, recruited Libby, and her and I climbed the Zodiac together. So it was Libby's first wall. I had a little, you know, I had one route under my belt, so it was like I kind of was understanding like the rope systems and managing like belays and stuff, which can obviously be a massive junk show and change your experience in many ways if you're not organized in that regard. And yeah, it was super fun. Like, Libby and I had an awesome time, but it was quite a learning curve for her to figure that stuff out. And there were like a lot of moments of like her standing at belays crying and just being like, oh, this is so like hard. But yeah, so did a number of walls with her, and then I think it was our second or third summer there that she was like, dude, like, the women's speed record on the nose is like, you know, it hasn't been touched in years, like we should focus our attention on that. And I was kind of like, okay, yeah, like, whatever, I'm down to try. So we first climbed Lurking Fear in a day together, and then Libby had gone with her boyfriend at the time, Jake Whitaker, and led every pitch on the nose in a day, and he Jumar'd for her. And and so then I was like, well, I have to do that too, so that I know. I'd never climbed the nose, just the upper pitches from the triple direct where it comes into it. And so Libby Jumar'd for me, and then, yeah, I just led all the pitches on the nose, and we were both like, you know, felt like we did a good job with our time and stuff for it being our first real trip up the route. And then, yeah, we just kind of went in the direction of starting to speed climb. So, I mean, speed climbing is, it's all relative. It's like, it feels really slow compared to like what the men have done at this point, like, just over 2 hour mark or whatever. But yeah, climbing well within the day. So,
yeah, I mean, you were down to, you guys were playing around in like the 8 to 10 hours kind of zone. Is that right? I can't remember.
Yeah. So,
because you set a record with Mayan as well, eventually.
Right. Yeah, and I think like the first time Libby climbed the nose, when she led all the pitches, she was like right around, I'm not going to be exact here, but right around 14 hours. Right. And my trip up it was just a little bit longer, like around the 14.5 hour mark or whatever. And then, the following year we went back and did the first run up the nose together. And I think we were like in the 10 hour and 10 and a half hour time frame, which was a record. But we knew that there was a ton of room for improvement. And then it wasn't long after that Quinn and Jess Mira went and dropped our time by a little bit. And then, Mayan and I teamed up and mostly to do the link up of the nose and then Half Dome. But we did a test run on the nose, dropped that time again, and then, on our link up day, we brought it down to just over the 7 hour mark. So
why were you good at that? Do you think?
I think I have a good, a good foundation, like in endurance sports and stuff. So I think that helps. I think that, that's a strong point for me. And that stuff sort of is just like a bit of an endurance feat, right? Even though we're like doing the vertical kilometer or whatever you want to call it, that's like still, rather you're aid climbing or free climbing, like highly technical. But I think, just being able to kind of like get into that flow and like, it's still bold, like even in that 7 to 10 hour time frame, like you have to kind of like hang it out there a bit. Not as much as like the boys like going in 2.5 hours or less. But I think just that willingness to do that. And then of course, before we were so young and I didn't really like, risk wasn't or the impacts of risk weren't quite like in my face yet. Like I hadn't experienced loss or what can happen really like by hanging it out there. And so there's just like a willingness to do it, which has changed over time with speed climbing.
I think it's pretty typical. Like there are these phases again, and not just like in the culture, but also in people's lives. And it seems like there was this flurry of a few years, and it was this group of women, and largely it ended with Quinn Brett's accident, and that you can just definitely just see that drop off. Had you dropped, like, was it still a big part of your life? Were you part of kind of that like awakening or whatever that accident caused in that sort of group or fire for doing this thing, or had you moved on already?
Like I was never quite attached to like this record on the nose in the same way that like Libby was super drawn to it and she was good at it. She was super psyched and stayed motivated for a long period of time. And then Mayan certainly, she was obviously free climbing at a super high level at the time, like having free climbed the Salathe, but she also had that drive for speed as well. And so she was good at like both facets of the Yosemite climbing scene. And her and Libby like they put a lot of time really into it, and that they did a lot of laps. And that wasn't really like what I was drawn to. And so like once Mayan and I did the link up, I was kind of like, okay, like I'm done with the nose.
Were you guys the first women to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I read that.
Well, not the first women. Like Libby had done the link up.
The first team
with a guy, and I believe I can't remember who, but there was one other woman who had also done the link up. But like first female team, so to speak. Yeah. But so I was like, I'm done with the nose, which I didn't end up being done because then I got like motivated by
in my notes.
by the soloing side of things. But that was a very different experience than. And maybe too, it's like I probably did hit like my risk tolerance with like what I was willing to do on the nose, and what Libby and Mayan were doing like made more sense. I mean, Mayan was just like such a strong free climber that of course like they were going to go faster with that ability to free climb harder than I could, and sort of do my thing on the nose solo. I definitely was like, okay, I'm done with this. And there were a few reasons for that. Certainly in regard to like the soloing, you know, I was pretty not loose, but relatively loose with my systems, and that like I didn't back up, you know, my gree. I didn't have like a knot in the end of my rope, and of course like all that was fine at the time because I'm still standing here. But I remember my friend Scott Deputy went and soloed the nose in a day, and he had this kind of wild thing happen on the pitch below Camp 5 where he also didn't have a knot, but he took a whipper.
He whipped.
And somehow the gree handle caught on something and then, you know, zipped down the tail end of his rope, but the rope like wrapped around his thigh. And I was like, whoa, that's like, shit can happen actually, you know, like the likelihood is low, but it's there, of course. So there was like a number of awakenings in those like early days of being like, okay.
Well, tell me a little bit. We don't have to spend too much time on it. There's so much to talk about. That's the way these things always go.
Yeah.
But I'm like this saga of you trying to get your solo time under 24 hours sounded a little bit manic.
Manic.
Or not manic, but you were like pushing it.
Yeah. I guess a little bit. So I soloed the nose twice.
Okay.
Over the period of like, I think it was like 3 weeks. I did it once in maybe late September and then a few weeks later. But the reason I went back to that, and certainly like I got attached to this 24-hour mark, right? You're like the first time I did it was like just around 24 and a half hours. And it was like, okay, but like that's not 24 hours, even though I was very proud of my effort on that first one. But like the way that one went was everything was going so smooth until I got to the boot on the nose. And then I had to pass 18 people, all between the boot and Camp 4. So, the Great Roof. And so it was just like this giant gong show of like people everywhere. And I felt like I actually did a really like smooth job of it, all things considered.
Got 24 and a half hours.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And at one point there were these two Czech guys, like just after the Lynn Hill Traverse, that were like, hey, can you take our rope up to the next anchor? Cause we don't want to lead this pitch. And so I took their rope up to the next anchor. I fixed it. They Jumar'd up while I was like rappelling down and cleaning.
So then you had to pass them.
And I also linked it into like just below the Great Roof to that anchor that's there. That's kind of, anyway, as I was Jumar'ing back up, so out of sight of what's going on ahead of me, like above me, I start like dropping. I'm on my rope with my Jumars and I start like dropping, and I start kind of freaking out. I'm like, what's going on? And I like start Jumar'ing really fast. I kind of get over the hump where I have visibility up there. And these guys are Jumar'ing my rope without asking, like up towards like the anchor where I have my rope fixed, because I had fixed theirs down at Camp 4. And the dude was like pulling pieces out because he didn't know how to, it kind of traverses a little bit. And so that's why I was like dropping. And I got up there and I just was like, dude, what? You know, like, and his buddy was all apologetic. He was like, I told him not to. And anyway, so there was this stuff going on. And then finally I got out of that chaos, and, you know, now it's like evening. I still was making really good time, all things considered. Once I got to the Great Roof, everybody's like setting up their portaledges down below me. I lead the Great Roof. I rappel down, and I'm getting ready to Jumar back up, and boom, like one of my Jumars and my ladders just like falls off my harness as I'm trying to unclip the other one. And I just like watch it ping pong through like all these 18 people that are below me, somehow misses everybody. And then I'm like standing there.
You're the junk show.
Yeah. And I'm just there like, oh shit, I got one Jumar now, which, you know, like, and I figured it out pretty quickly, but in hindsight, it was like, I've never like just Jumar to wall with one Jumar. So it kind of took a minute to like be like, okay, I got the gree, and then to like realize that I can just like clip the rope through a carabiner above to like make the whole thing smoother. But that took a pitch or two to figure out. And yeah, and then it was nighttime, so everything just kind of slowed down. And then yeah, when I topped out in the morning, I was still like super pleased and proud with what I had pulled off, being that was like my first real. It wasn't my first wall solo because I had soloed Mescalito before that, but it was my first like big effort with like push style and one rope, and just sort of that mental challenge of being like, okay, retreating's like, sure, you could figure it out, but it would be super difficult with just one rope and stuff like that. That commitment level, I guess, in a sense, as committed as you can be in Yosemite, of course. So yeah, it was a few weeks later that I was like, I'm going to go back and do this again because I know I can do it quicker. But then that one even though I didn't have to pass people, it really just went a lot worse. So, and that was because I ran out of water, like at the Great Roof in the evening. And then, yeah, I just kind of had it was a really hot day. And then I just had this really long night of hallucinating and like getting to the anchor in the middle of the night in the dark and like, clipping in, but then being like, am I clipped in? And then like checking it again and being like, okay, I'm clipped in. But then like 30 seconds later being like, did I check myself? Am I clipped in? Like quadruple checking and never really with certainty that I'm like actually safe. And then of course that's the same with like clipping back into the gree to descend and then like making sure. So it was like, I was in a poor state of mind, but obviously kept it together and was safe enough, and then got to the top like a bit over 25 hours. And I remember that was like super early in the morning when I summited, descended off. I was like in a pretty fragile emotional state. And I remember seeing my friend Scott Deputy like at the meadow. He was down there waiting for me. And I just like, he gave me a hug and I just like came unglued and started crying in his arms. And I was just like, okay, that was enough. I did it twice in a few weeks. Like that was an awesome effort. But yeah, I think the next year I had one more in me. I was like, okay, I'm going to do like 24 hours. But at this point I had been connected with Adidas Outdoor. And you probably know Shane Limpy. I still don't know if I pronounced his last name right. But Adidas wanted Shane to photograph me on it. And that whole vibe of, just like the photography or video world was... It totally changed my motivation, and in turn, I was like, I don't want to do it, and then I never did it again.
Oh, I thought you had.
No.
Huh.
No.
That's an interesting insight, though.
Yeah.
What you just said about the change of emotion or of motivation around it with a photographer and videographer.
And I mean, Shane's is, he's as good of a person as you can have up there, of course, and why. It wasn't so much about him, but why it shifted. It might have just been a realization that I was like, am I really motivated to actually do this? Like, and do I really care about this like 24-hour mark? You're like, it's all kind of like you did the thing already. Like you proved to yourself, whatever you were looking for. So now what are you doing? Like, you're just trying to like be in the books as like the first woman to solo El Cap in 24 hours. And it's like, I think I just got to the point of realization of like not caring so much about it.
That's a really mature realization. Actually, how old were you?
I guess at that point I would have been, that was 2014. So, I was in my 20s still, but probably like around 27 or something.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like that, I don't know, it fits. It's like it says a little bit about you. Now, you were quote unquote hooked up with Adidas Outdoor, but you aren't a person that, in my mind, who really pursued being a professional climber, because didn't you become a guide and then you spent a lot of years just as this avalanche forecaster? So talk about that a little bit, like where your motivations to kind of fund this climbing lifestyle that you wanted, but you didn't necessarily seem to see a path there, at least not at that time.
Yeah. I guided for a little bit, and that was like a pretty short-lived thing. It was mostly focused on the West Buttress of Denali and a bit of time in the Cascades. And yeah, like while I'm thankful for that time, because it definitely like added to sort of this foundation that I built over time, it was like definitely not my thing. And it just, it really took like a couple years to be like certain of that. And so, while I was working in the Valley on the SAR team, like I would guide a trip on Denali each summer as well, which financially was helpful since Valley SAR wasn't like a lucrative career financially. And the pro climber thing, it never crossed my mind. Like it wasn't on my radar at all. And of course you wonder now, like if that would look different because it's all like so in our face. But I also just was like, oh, like I'm out doing my thing. Like I'm definitely not good enough for something like that, you know? And it never crossed my mind that like I'd ever get to that spot. And really the only reason it did was because Mayan and Libby were working with Adidas Outdoor, and they connected me to that. And so it was like gear or apparel and like a little bit of trip support at the time. So it was, it was a small contract, but yeah, it was certainly my first foray into it. But my life had at that point, even I was like very much dirtbagging still. And actually at that point I was working as an avalanche forecaster for the highway. So I guess I had sort of dipped out of that like full dirtbagging scene to having a stable career, right, so to speak. But the support from sponsorship or companies is still something that I'm kind of like, well, like is what I'm doing like that cool or important? It's important to me, of course. So I still question if it's like, I'm like, why, like why do I get this? That's kind of the evolution of it.
Yeah, I mean, I get that from you. Like, the little imposter syndrome or whatever sort of cliche, that thing that you want to do with it. But I find it, and I think people listening to this, when they're done, will find it sort of humorous that you feel as though your accomplishments aren't worthy, because they certainly are, in my opinion. I mean, hell, you're on the Enormocast, right? It's like pinnacle kind of stuff. But the thing that we're not, I mean, you mentioned in the beginning, you're at Snowbirds Patroller, is that you're a skier, like you're a high level, big mountain skier. So, and it sounds like then skiing was sort of an original passion before climbing.
Actually, it was part of the progression. Like it was a planned progression kind of to get me to being a climber.
Really?
Which is, it's, I mean,
explain that idea.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. So, because
I managed to get there without the skiing.
Yeah. Well, I grew up just like in the burbs of Salt Lake, like not in a climber family or anything, like I was certainly exposed to the outdoor because my dad was super into bow hunting and fishing and stuff. And, we did those more basic things of like going camping. And then, as a young teenager, I became a snowboarder, and I was super into skateboarding already and longboarding, just like bombing down hills and stuff. And, do you want me to start at kind of the beginning? I told the story for the first time the other day.
Good.
In a long time, but, where it started was I saw a book on the Alaska Range at one point that my dad showed me, which kind of sparked my interest in like mountains or whatever, And then I started going to the library, and there was a library in Salt Lake that had a lot of, if not all, a lot of the mountain magazines. And the first mountain magazine that I pulled off the shelf was a 1988 magazine that had a Voytek article in it called The Art of Suffering. And I was probably 13 or 14 years old when I read this, but this totally was really like the start of like the change of course for my life. And I stole the magazine. I still have it. It's like one of my favorite articles, and it sort of speaks to like the night naked climbing back in I guess the early to mid 80s it would have been, that was happening on the 8,000 meter peaks in the Himalaya, when these guys would just like pack a candy bar, a little bit of water, and just like set off in the night and climb alpine style up these 8,000 meter peaks with no support, no tent. So, I mean, this stuff's been happening for a long time, right? But we almost forget about it. Anyway, I held onto that magazine, and then I was just like, in school, I was a swimmer. I was staring at the blue line in the bottom of the pool for way too many hours of my teenage years. And then, but the whole plan was when I was finished with high school, I was going to try to figure out how to meet climbers, but I didn't know what that looked like. I was just like, I didn't even really know about climbing gyms or anything. And I know Salt Lake had at least one at the time.
Yeah, Rock Creation was there. Yeah.
But I didn't know about it. So I was like...
it was pretty low-key underground kind of vibe still.
It was cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like, okay, I need to become a ski patroller, and I will most certainly meet climbers. And so I switched from snowboarding to skiing so that I could do that. I walked into the office at Snowbird when I was 19 and was like, I would like a job. And the guy running the ski patrol was like, well, we don't hire people younger than 21 because you have to be 21 in order to handle explosives. And I was like, I for some reason I had a lead that was wrong information. And so I figured out that you had to be 21 to have the permit to purchase explosives. But if you were working under somebody else's permit, you could be 18. And so I brought that information back to him, and he was like, okay, you got me. So he hired me. And
that's an awesome gamble, though.
Yeah.
Because another guy could have been, fuck you, get the fuck out of here. Quit trying to prove me wrong.
Totally.
Yeah, well, that's cool.
Yeah, he was awesome about it. And so anyway, because that was sort of the start of it. And I still didn't know climbers. Like, that took a little bit of time, but I just bought a book on how to ice climb. And meanwhile, like, I had started running around the mountains on skis and, just like trying to figure out like moderate, like mountaineering and stuff. And then there's a formation in Little Cottonwood Canyon called the Great White Icicle. It's a very moderate, like multi-pitch ice formation that forms most years. And so I'd go to the base of that thing and I practiced how to swing tools and like, use crampons on ice and stuff. And then I bought a book on how to rope solo. And yeah, over the period of this winter, like I just figured out those rope systems. And the first couple times didn't go well. I got like super scared and never made it really anywhere on this thing. But then with a little bit of repetition, like I finally started rope soloing it. And I just did a ton of repetition on this like water ice 3 climb. And then I'm skipping some stuff, like other things evolved, but these 2 brothers from Argentina, the Benegas brothers, were living in Salt Lake. And somehow I crossed paths with them. Like one of them, Willie, ended up ski patrolling at Snowbird eventually. But prior to that, I got to know these guys, and Damien took me down to Indian Creek for my first like rock climbing foray, and straight to Super Crack, my first rock climbing ever. And I just remember it was a total battle for me, of course, but I was like super into it. And I was just like, okay, like we're making progress, and then in many ways, those guys did take me under their wing, and they gave me the equipment I needed to pursue more winter type climbing. Because I just had some old stuff that I probably bought at IME that was like, I didn't have much money. So anyway, I got better equipment from them. And even my first, when I went to Denali for the first time in 2019 to ski it, those guys gave me a pair of like Dynafit boots and skis with Dynafit pin bindings on it to use because I didn't have anything that light. And yeah, the boots
Would
were
you have,
like
some Dukes or something?
Fritchies, probably the original
right.
Fritchie, setup, and certainly no boots that were quite that light. I was probably ski touring in alpine boots. I don't know what. Yeah, it was like. And anyway, but their boots were like almost 3 sizes too big for my feet. But I stuffed the toe box so that my foot like fit in there pretty well. And then I went to Denali and was able to ski it with. But I didn't know any different, so it was like totally fine. And now as we like progress through this stuff, I'm so nitpicky about equipment that I'm like, why did I do that? But I'm like, oh, that was cool. Like I didn't even know. I didn't care. So those guys were like a big part of the beginning for me.
I mean, it's a really cool story because it's like it's a very self-determined story, for a teenage girl basically that has this like mission. I mean, it reminds me of like how I got it. I was planning, I did the same thing where I found a magazine, literally found a magazine as well. And then I planned to be a climber long before I'd ever seen it, knew what it was. I just had pictures of, in this case, it was John Backer in tiny shorts. And I was like, I want to climb in tiny shorts.
Yeah.
And so, and I did this, I like planned it years ahead of time before I ever managed to actually rock climb. So I was more interested in the rock climbing. Like I said, it was the article was about rock climbing. So that's why I was going to be a rock climber. You were going to be an alpinist, but it's also like, as a teenager, you're pulled in all these directions and you don't know what you want to do. So it's really interesting that you kind of did. I think the skateboarding culture kind of thing probably fit into somewhere like I'm being
sure
against the grain a little bit.
Probably.
You couldn't find climbers, but you must have had friends outside of the climbing community. But that you're sort of painting a picture as kind of this, person on her own personal mission. Yeah. What was that like? Having friends being like, "What are you into?" Like, what's up?
Like certainly my closest friends that I like went to school with and stuff were doing very different things and living very different lives. Mm-hmm. Like interesting things too, like things that like I enjoyed and related to, like art and stuff, but not on the same path with like kind of the outdoor mountain realm of things. But I did, like when I was in high school, I was tuning skis at a ski shop. And so my first like sort of long-term boyfriend, was like maybe a year and a half or 2 years. He was a skier and he was also into longboarding. And so that was probably like a helpful step a little bit of just like, like understanding skiing better, having respect for it and stuff. Like when I was like a little younger, I was kind of a punk about like snowboarding's everything and skiers suck kind of an idea. And then, sort of like totally shifting that perspective and realizing that both of them were like equally as awesome and just different. But that still wasn't climbing, of course. And nobody in my inner circle was a climber. So
it's interesting too. There are other parallels. It was before your time, but I spent a season housekeeping at the Rustler up in Alta.
Oh, cool.
And also went down and climbed the Great White Icicle. Yeah. It was actually the first ice climb I ever soloed, and one of the very few I have actually. Yeah. But I used to go down and I never rope soloed it, but I soloed it, or I'd talk somebody into going down there and doing it as well, and then trying to rock climb a little bit down in the base of the canyon on nice days and stuff. So awesome. You didn't have to be a patroller. You could have just come and cleaned toilets and met a couple climbers actually. Yeah. But
funny,
better
one more funny story about the Great White Icicle is that like so still at this point that was the only ice I climbed for probably almost 2 seasons or whatever. And after rope soloing it a lot, I started soloing it. But I was still like, I probably at a very beginner to low intermediate level as a climber or whatever. And I remember meeting Nikki Smith, and she's super into photography, right? And she saw me, and I think she thought that I was like, oh, who's this chick that's out here like soloing this thing? And when I got back to the car, she gave me her card and was like, you should call me sometime and let me photograph you. And I was like, you have no idea who you're talking to. Like, I'm not even a climber. I just climbed this thing. And and I never called her, but that was funny.
It's pretty interesting though, this network you actually kind of inadvertently made. I mean, the Benegases, right? Nikki, at the time she's writing the guidebooks, and she knows as much about Salt Lake area ice climbing as anyone in the world.
For sure.
Yeah. And so it's funny that you're like, I don't know any climbers. And then you're sort of like randomly meeting some of the most important climbers that are in the zone.
Yeah. Which was awesome. And, I don't know. I mean, but in a sense, maybe you felt this way if like you kind of had like a plan of how to get to be a climber or whatnot. Is it in a way, this all kind of feels a bit like what I was supposed to be doing.
Right.
And maybe, of course, I wasn't aware of that when I was like 10 or younger, but became aware of that in some capacity as a teenager. And then as I did finally enter into doing these things, it almost in many ways felt like a natural progression. It just felt like natural, you know?
Right.
At least moving around through the mountains. I can't say free climbing is ever like, I feel like that's something I've had to work really hard for. It's like less natural for me, but like all these other aspects of climbing have, and I know free climbing is like a huge part of it, of course, but free, like rock climbing. But yeah, that one's felt the least natural for me. Something I've had to work hard for.
You know, you had this Yosemite era. It felt like it did have, if not a very decided endpoint, it ended in a certain extent. This like wall climbing obsession.
Yeah.
And you were always on this move to being in the big mountains. You had skied Denali when you were 19, which is awesome. You know, you went up there. That's probably a whole hour story as well. But she just shrugged her shoulders for everybody who's not here in the room. She's like, yeah, whatever. Skied it when I was 19.
No.
But you know, the guiding Denali a few summers in a row or whatever it happened to be, that puts you in love with this place and builds you experience for this place. And that was your kind of next sort of theater to express what you really wanted to do this whole time, which was to be in these big mountains and combine climbing and skiing. So yeah, move us to that era.
Well, so I actually, in 2010, I left to go, I left like this sort of seasonal life of ski patrolling and working on Yosemite Valley search and rescue and dipping into guiding on Denali and whatnot. And took this job in Idaho working for the state transportation department, forecasting for the highway, which was my first stable job, certainly paid better than everything I was doing and offered the right flexibility to go on expeditions and stuff, which I wasn't quite there yet. But actually when I got there, I felt a little burnt out from my time in Yosemite, and I almost quit climbing altogether and became a mountain bike racer for a year, and then quickly realized that I was like, okay, this is like not my thing. Now back to climbing so that I can go into the mountains and whatnot. And so the speed climbing stuff certainly overlapped with that early period of living in Idaho.
Wait, did you get through your mountain biking era without wrecking yourself?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be part of the...
I got pretty competitive with it too, and I was like, I don't know that this is like what I want to be doing.
Right. Good for my soul.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it was after, so Mayan and I, like Libby and I were doing the speed climbing stuff on the nose specifically, like around the 2011 time period, and then Mayan and I did the link up in 2012, and then the soloing on the nose was in 2014, and there was a lot of other El Cap climbing in the midst of that too. But and yeah, it was like 2000. It was after Mayan and I did the link up that I kind of just like had this like urge that like, okay, now I start alpine climbing, like technical climbing in the mountains, as opposed to the more mountaineering side of things. But then, you know, there's the whole thing again of like, well, how do you find a partner? And my friend Kyle Dempster, who I had now been connected with for a number of years, I ran into him somewhere and he was like, dude, you need to meet my girlfriend. She's rad. She's super into like, you know, climbing in the mountains, and I think you guys would love climbing with each other. And so that was almost a blind date in a way. Like, I think I ended up meeting Jewel, her name's Jewel Lund, like one time before we had made a plan to go climb in the Alaska Range. And it was like a 5-minute passing, like, oh, now I know what you look like, and great, let's meet up next spring and make a plan. So our plan was to go to Mount Huntington together, which is one of the lower altitude peaks of the Alaska Range. It's like around 12,000 feet, but it's one of the most iconic peaks in the Alaska Range. It's super beautiful, highly technical, you know, and that's where we first went. And it was both of our first trips to climb like a real technical route in the bigger mountains. And our plan was to go climb the south face. It's called the Phantom Wall, like tackle, did Did he do the first ascent of the Phantom Wall? I think he did, Jack Tackle. But
likely.
Yeah. But that was our plan, was to go repeat that. And so we went in there. It was way too hot. We were like, well, we've never done anything together. Maybe we should like go climb one of the trade routes together and see how we do. And we climbed a route called the Colton Leach, which is just a beautiful route that's mostly ice climbing. And that went really well. And then we went over and had a look at the Phantom Wall, which was falling apart. And so we were kind of like, okay, well, we still have good weather. Like, what else should we do? And all we had was a photo of the face and the existing lines on it, but no information. And this one in particular called Polar Chrome caught our eye. It's over on the far left side of the west face. And so we were just like, oh, let's go do that. And we just set off. We decided no bivy gear, nothing. Let's just do this in a push and see how it goes. And we encountered it was beautiful climbing, but it was quite hard. You know, it was like M7 down on the lower rock wall and like overhanging water ice 6 ice that was rotten. And then you have to finish on this thing called the French Ridge, which has a reputation, and it's a really wild place because it's vertical terrain on a ridge line with cornices on both sides, and then crevasses that go horizontal and vertical all over, and highly unprotectable. And we got up there like right at dusk, and then you have like the nice Alaskan light that sort of makes it so you don't have to climb with a headlamp. And I just remember we like traversed the French Ridge. It felt like it was all night and never spoke, but it was required an immense amount of focus. And we watched the sun kind of set on the horizon and then come back up on the horizon. And we summited in the morning and had a candy bar together, and then descended. And we were like, holy shit. Like we just like went off into the mountains with nothing but some food and water, and it worked, And I found out later that route had only one ascent by a local Canadian, Rob Roan. He was one of them. And they aided some portion of it, and like we managed to free climb the whole thing, and it just went so smoothly, and yes, in such a beautiful way that like it's still one of the most memorable climbs I've ever had, even though it certainly like wasn't the biggest. And that just kind of set the path forward for everything else that happened. So.
And I assume you'd climb something besides the Great White Icicle by that point.
So the 2014. So it's like at this point now I've kind of got this like close to 10-year foundation of like running around the mountains and climbing in Yosemite and stuff. So yeah,
that's pretty awesome. I mean, the first experience climbing with Jewel, there is this kind of sort of theme coupled with this ambivalence in your career about climbing with other women. It seems to be partially circumstantial, partially something that you do enjoy, but also you like to also like, hey, it's not like this mission that I have. Talk a little bit about that. This climbing with other women, but not really wanting to make some sort of big deal out of it. I mean, where do you sit on that? I mean, I watched an interview with you and Ann Gilbert Chase, and both of you were like, yeah, I mean, we love it, but it's also like we like climbing with dudes too. Like let's not like go too hard on this. Like, what's your feelings about that?
It's kind of funny how it played out, because I think it was like it was a very important thing early on. However, it wasn't something I pursued. It's something that like really unfolded quite naturally. Mm-hmm. Like, it's, the big wall scene with Libby and Mayan, like that was a very natural thing. And yet I also feel, and of course I was climbing with dudes in the midst of it. It's just like my bigger, more notable accomplishments all have been mostly with women. And, it unfolded quite naturally. And at the same time, like maybe I wasn't aware of it during like the actual events, but looking back on it, I'm like, oh, that was like something that I kind of needed to do too, because there's still, I mean, in some capacity, it's probably still out there, but I don't notice it so much now. But, there was always like the doubt of like, oh, if you're just like with the dude, then like he was the reason that you did it. Mm-hmm. And like even some of one of my closest friends now, like often question like, oh, are you sure you're capable of doing that and stuff? And so there was kind of this like being able to prove to myself, but then also like with climbing with a female partner, you could like prove to, it wasn't so much like the broader world because I wasn't really thinking about that, but like to these people that were important to me or I looked up to that like had doubt, that like you're like, no dude, like we are capable of this, or I am, or whatever. And then with like the alpine climbing stuff over up till the current time, like it's just I've ended up with these incredible female partners, and it's all just happened super naturally, like without effort. And then like when Ann Gilbert had her kid a bit over a year ago, I was kind of like, oh gosh, like I wonder if, now that she's like sort of shifting the things that she's doing and her willingness to be gone for long periods of time or whatnot, like I was like, I wonder if I'll like find another female alpine climber that like I connect with. And then just naturally it's like this woman from France, Fanny Schmutz, just kind of, we stepped into each other's lives, and now, it's been a pleasure to climb together. So I don't know how it's happened. But it's been awesome.
Yeah, because I mean, Jules like largely dropped out of the scene as well, hasn't she?
Yeah, so after Kyle, her partner, he went missing in Pakistan in 2016, and in the midst of that, Jewel was in grad school. And I think just like there's so much happening there with like dealing with the grief of from loss, and then being wrapped up in a program that requires so much of you. And she went on to get her PhD after that. And then I think just like recognize that maybe for her, at least at that point in time, like climbing was sort of an all or nothing thing, and it didn't feel healthy at that point. So she kind of stepped away from it, and she's just doing other really rad things in life.
Right. I mean, it's certainly, I have like some admiration for that a lot of times, because it's like, again, I talked about this sort of maturity of your realizations in the past, and with like, why do I need to shave 20 minutes off this dumb thing? Like, it's fulfilled what I wanted to do, and that's what I need for myself. So I admire it, as I admire that more than just like still going at it, even if you don't love it anymore, which is a common thing that happens in climbing quite often. So, and you've sort of flowed in and out a little bit with climbing as well.
Yeah.
It sounds like, but one of these things, like if you start looking at you on the internet or whatever, everything is dominated, honestly, by this, by soloing the Cassin, or Cassin, if you want to ride it with Assassin. But it also, I mean, it happened a while ago. It's not like your most current thing.
Right.
But it does feel like it was, I can connect all these dots, this solo missions on El Cap, and, all this stuff you learned in the Alaska range, and the skiing, because you did a ski descent to get to the base of it that hadn't been done before. You climbed it with your skis on. You talked about your earlier 19-year-old mission where you had, crap gear that didn't fit. And now it was this experienced mountaineer who was like tuning and dialing in your gear and what was necessary and what we're going to ski okay and what you could climb with. And I mean, it just seemed like it was, in fact, for now, or at the moment, was this very big culmination. We don't have to do a blow by blow on it because it's been done elsewhere, but I do want to ask you about that decision of realizing you could, you were capable and or willing to put yourself out there on a route like that.
That was a bit of a progression as well that I did, surfaced probably back in 2015 or whatever. And then 2016, I did go attempt to do that very thing. I went light to like 14 camp on Denali. The weather was crappy. I was kind of just like suffering through the whole thing and then recognizing that I'm like, I don't know that I'm actually like mentally committed to this, like that I'm there. And so I pulled the plug on it and I left. And then it was in the back of my mind for all the years leading up to actually doing it. But at that point, it's like I had, like Ann Gilbert, Chase and I were out getting after other things. And, I was always kind of like, maybe I'd do it after I like did our trip, but then I'd walk away from the trip that her and I shared and feel fulfilled. And so I'd just be like, okay, it's not this year. And then, basically COVID obviously happened in 2020. Nothing really happened that year. And it sort of resurfaced. It was like, okay, 2021, like going to do this thing. And I just knew it was the right time. Like I was 100% like ready. I made the whole thing as comfortable as I could so that I didn't have any reason that I had to leave, like I took really good food. I took books. I took way too much shit to 14 camp and just was like, you don't have an excuse. Like you've got all the time in the world and you're going to sit here till you go. And then that trip, it was just so easy to be there because I think my mind was in the right space. And so I was like, it's such a social place on the West Buttress there too, but I was able to like immerse with different people and sort of spend time by myself too. And then, when the time came, I was ready. I should note too that like Colin Haley, who obviously soloed that a few years before, he's a friend and, he sort of was the person that I like bounced ideas off of and he offered advice and stuff. So, in many ways, like he kind of soothed my mind about like my doubts or whatnot in a way. And then of course you on your own have to work through those things, but it was all about approaching the Cassin that I was most afraid of. I wasn't really afraid of the commitment of setting off on the route. I was just afraid about like falling in a crevasse and disappearing.
Which is there's a long history of that in Alaska, like especially with soloists, obviously Johnny Waterman being sort of the original famous story of marching off to solo something. And that was the last anybody ever saw of him. So
100%.
Yeah. So, it's not an unfounded fear because you can't do the proper glacial travel with one person.
Unless
you tie a ladder to yourself. They've done that.
Charlie Porter. Yeah, pretty funny. Yeah, I wasn't going to do that. And of course...
Either skis or an extension ladder from Lowe's.
Yeah.
I don't know which one I should use.
And there's not really any good approach to the base of the Cassin. Like everything has its risk and there's better options and worse options. And that's really where like I so much appreciated Colin's input because, I'd been up... So the Northeast Fork is obviously like where Muggs would have disappeared or like there's been, there's just... so many overhead hazards in that drainage. Like that's like absolutely not going to do it. The best thing I could come up with was to ski down the West Rib and go down the little couloir at the base of it. But then you still have to travel on the glacier for a while, big crevasses by yourself. And so that was like the best idea. And then the East Fork, which is what Colin went up, that takes you to the south face. And then you have to go up over like a little pass, started to seem like the best option to me, but I've walked up and out of that drainage multiple times. And there's hundreds of crevasses. It's just, they're maybe a little bit more covered in snow. So, which can be better or worse. And it was Colin who was like, well, dude, if you're going to like do it with skis, why not go down the Seattle ramp, which I'd been down before. And I fell in a crevasse on the Seattle ramp when I was with Jewel. But he's like, well, dealing with like 30 crevasses instead of 150, like, what's better or worse? And I was like, good point.
Logic right there.
Yeah. So that's when I kind of shifted my mindset to just doing that. And
well, let me ask you this. A lot of what I read about it and your own kind of report on it, and you just mentioned it, these just mental games, if you want to call them that, working it out. Your literal lines were like, that first trip I sat in the tent and talked myself out of it. But you seem to be very aware of that part of yourself in terms of your motivations and sort of being willing to kind of probe them. And that's not a absolute thing that everyone does who alpine climbs. And I think personally, it feels like to me that it's actually a lot of times the opposite, where you just sit there and shut them off. Like, don't let those thoughts in because we are going and we are going to do this. So, tell me a little bit about that part of your personality, because it seems to be a good, you're sitting here with me after you didn't fall in the crevasse or whatever. It's a preservation instinct to a certain extent, but you can't stay home, and you got to eventually get out of the tent if you want to accomplish anything. So can you talk a little bit about that psychology? Have you ever delved into it?
Yeah.
How your brain works around that stuff?
Yeah. I'm still sitting here so far, but
yeah, I mean, there's the
luck. That's the goal for
there's
sure.
There's the luck part, but
yeah,
you make your luck.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's like something, certainly things I'm aware of. I'm not sure I've like dived into it super deep, but like there's
That's
balance.
Why you're here.
Yeah. Going deep. There's balance there for sure, right? Like, of course, at some point you're just like, you have to tune out what's going on in your mind if you want to go. And I think that I can be pretty good at that too. But maybe too, I'm just like, work through logic and break these things down and try. Something I've thought about a lot is like the difference between like fear and simply just being scared, and trying to identify like the difference between those two things, because one is healthy and one is not. Well, not to say it's not healthy, but like one allows you to take a step forward and one holds you back, right? So, and there's probably a more like psychological, like scientific way of putting that, but that's how I've thought about it, is like scared versus fear. And so like I've been able to, I think most of the time, and I would imagine get better at it over time, is just try to like understand what that difference is. And if I'm actually in a state of fear, or if I'm just got like the normal nervous, scared energy that like I can actually like work through and then work with and then try to understand like, is this like, is what I'm afraid of like a real thing? And do I need to like identify what those things are? And should I be doing this? As versus like, no, you've done all your homework, like everything's in alignment, like you're prepared as you can be physically and mentally. The weather's appropriate for it. The conditions are appropriate for it. And if I can like identify that all those things are in place, then I'm like, okay, we're good. Like, or, you know, or certainly an awareness of the surroundings of like, it's rare that everything's perfect. So being able to identify the things that like you do have some control over. Sometimes that takes years, obviously, like with the Cassine to be able to do that stuff. And then, other times it's like, but I do feel like I've been generally pretty good at like, you know, you walk up to the base of something, you set up the tent, and I've, for myself, I feel like I've been able to just like tune out and not get caught up in like the what ifs, like once I step into that place. And then break everything down piece by piece. So, you know, it's like, okay, we just got to walk to the base and then climb the first pitch and not look at like the whole picture, which can feel so overwhelming. And I really think that that's like what's allowed me to step into the things I've done, is just being able to break it down and not overthink it.
Well, I want to ask you about a couple moments.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like you just talked about, it's a very social kind of setup at base camp. Like famously so, you know, the pictures come on, everybody's partying and having a good old time and, you know, flipping pancakes and drinking and whatever else that's been brought to that point. You're in that, but you have this, you know, you're going to walk off into the mountains by yourself in whatever day you choose. Plus you're like, I mean, I'm sure everyone knows, right? That's what, at least all your friends know, like, she's here to do this thing.
Yeah, enough people watch you walk out.
Yeah, and it's like kind of this almost like samurai thing, right? You're less like, you know, you're off on your own. And what's that like? I mean, was it an interesting moment? Or was it just routine that like, I'm going today, I'll see you guys later?
Well, that year in particular, there were a lot of really fun people up there, and kind of like these little like social parties happening, right? Like a couple of friends like Vitaly and Nick, they were up there to climb the Denali Diamond, and those guys had this like really rad underground cave that they built, bags of wine, like, you know, just like having these like wild socials every night. And then this other crew, like they brought a grill up and they were like grilling hot dogs, and all this stuff was like happening the evening before I knew I was going to set off the next day. But not till like midday, because I was looking for warmer temperatures for ski conditions. So that night I was just like, whatever, I'm going to go like immerse in this scene and not get caught up like in my mind until I'm like ready to like, until I like have that feeling of like, okay, now you need to like step out and like sort of readjust to this like place that you're going to be in. so, yeah, I just like went and immersed, and then went to my tent that night and was able to just sort of make that mind shift. And then I had like a very like chill, peaceful morning, kind of like removing myself from the scene and like doing my final preparations and like drinking a bit of coffee, and I slept in and then, yeah, I kind of, in a sense, I didn't really have to avoid people because the weather was good. So people were already
scattered,
doing their thing. And then, yeah, I just kind of put my backpack on and stepped off. And I remember some of the guys from the Park Service that were there that like knew I was going. They just like waved at me. And yeah, I think kind of people respect that you're probably
right,
like,
that you're slipping into solo mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's, I was a solo 8 climber, wall soloist, and I used to feel the same thing. I mean, and obviously there's, like we joked, there's like no commitment on El Cap really. Although back then it felt more so, but
absolutely.
But yeah, and that like kind of removal was important to me. And I also it was important to me to solo a route by myself, and which sounds stupid, but on El Cap, or a lot of times there's a lot of reasons that you're actually with people, even though you're like 100%. Rope soloing. But I would do routes that usually wouldn't have anybody on them. But yeah, it's an interesting feeling of suddenly like have that kind of like quieting of your mind and the realization you're going to be alone. So another moment, so you get down there, you do this scary thing, the skiing and crossing what glacier you had to get there. You set up this little bivvy that you described really well, of like just kind of snuggling in underneath an overhang to wait to get started, for the conditions to get started. But you kind of just explained that. It feels like, are you now like, I'm ready, I'm at peace, I'm here. Yeah. Because I mean, that's the point where you're like, holy shit, I'm out here by myself. I just cut myself off with this glacial travel, basically. So what was that like that night before?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's
evening or whatever it was.
Of course, because it's Denali, it's a good weather window. These two friends, Vitaly and Nick, they were going to climb the Denali Diamond. So those guys actually put a boot track in down the Seattle ramp that morning before I left, which was awesome. I mean, I was ready to go down there on skis and figure it out without that, but I really quite appreciated that was there. And so I knew they were somewhere in there, camped out in the Serac. Or like, one of the crevasses. And so anyway, I made my way down the Seattle ramp, which all went super smoothly until the end. I had taken like a short piece of rope because my memory of getting over this Bergschrund was that we only needed a short piece of rope. And I had to take my skis off right above it because it was blue ice. And I like cramp on down to the bottom, and I was like, oh my God, this is like 70 meters. It was massive. And I was like, my rope's not going to get me even close to getting over this thing. And so I wandered around up there for a while, like trying to figure out how I could get down without a rope. And I traversed like way over towards the wall, like away from where I had been standing. And then, kind of found this like sneak through that I was able to just like down climb over. But then now this area was so broken up that I was actually like, I was in full like focus mode. Like I was pretty nervous about it. And I was like, oh, this could be the end of me down here. Cause there were big cracks. It was super messy, like a ton of Serac debris. And I put my skis back on and traversed between these two large cracks, and one of them the Schrund, and then this big crevasse. And I was traversing across, and then all of a sudden I saw these like little boot marks that were in the midst of the Serac debris chaos going up into the Serac. And so, of course, like this whole experience I was having within my own head by myself, like shifted because I was like, oh, these dudes are in there. And so I just like went up their little boot pack and popped over, and then they're in there listening to like the Wu-Tang and like the vibes, like, it totally different. And I'm just like, hell yeah, and I just stopped in for a quick hello because I just wanted to continue with like my little quest. And then I was like, well, since you guys are here, will you at least watch me like go through this like messy chaos below? That way, if I disappear, you know that I'm where I'm at.
Where to put the roses.
Yeah, exactly. That sounds kind of grim, but that was like what I was looking at, where I was like, this is not what I wanted to see. But anyway, I just sort of straight lined it as much as I could. It was hard because it was so messy with like ice chunks and stuff that it wasn't like the sort of stuff where you could just like point your skis and know you're gonna like, you've got a clear exit.
Right.
You kind of had to navigate through this mess, and so they had eyes on me. So it definitely like changed the vibe a little bit, but not in a bad way. It was just different. It was cool to see them, and then I just sort of traversed off and then spent the night. But kind of like I said before, it was like I had that out of the way, and then I just had excitement for what was ahead of me instead of like being scared.
That's awesome. I'm thinking of the end of the, you probably don't know this, the end of Jeremiah Johnson when he gives the little nod to the crow that he'd been fighting, the crow Indian that he'd been fighting forever. Now, just cool. Imagine you as you got out of sight of those guys. Give them the nod.
Well, and I remember actually when I like, after I crossed that messy area I was talking about and got into the apron, you're still kind of higher than like where the Cassine starts. And so, and the conditions were awesome in there. So I actually remember just like I was on these tiny skis with Skimo boots. So it's not like you're like, tearing it up, but it was good, like boot top powder. And I remember making these like awesome turns like beneath the massive southwest face. And then there was this big eagle soaring like up above me, but not very high above me. And I was like, whoa, dude, this is awesome. Like so special. It was like that, just a moment of like magic.
Mm-hmm. So I play this game sometimes. I do this like Google Earth thing, right? Like if I'm laying out, camped out or whatever, I do this like zoom out. I imagine like the camera like zooming out and like kind of showing where I am on the earth, that image. And that like feeling of being out there, even though those guys, well, now you were cut off from them as well. Yeah. Like it must have been a little bit intense.
Yeah. Of course, we're all, we all experience this like with things that are scary or miserable, but I do remember points within like the actual climb where I like was in a state of suffering for periods or whatever, but recreational suffering, of course, but like I do remember just like a great like sort of sense of peace like that evening when I was there, and that was like the overlying feeling more than like feeling anything else. And I slept so well, like which is, that can be unusual, like before something big, but I slept so well that I just like slept straight through my alarm and got up actually quite a bit later than I intended to. And it was a warm night, so that helped because I didn't have like much with me, but I don't recall that. But
right.
Sometimes we forget those things.
Yeah. It's not really even like an intensity. It's just kind of a realization of like your smallness.
Oh, yeah. I definitely realized that. I was just like, I was just like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm like down here by myself, like in this like wild and big terrain, even though there was a sense of familiarity because I'd been there before, like when Jewel and I climbed the diamond. But it was, that intensity for sure.
Yeah, and the diamond climb and the Slovak hadn't happened yet though, had it?
No, those were all before.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
So those both kind of finish up on the top of that, right?
Yeah. So you both of those, like the Slovaks on the south face, the diamonds on the southwest face. So sort of and then the Cassine splits them. Yeah. And so all the technical parts of the Cassine I'd never been on, but then both of those routes meet into the upper Cassine, like where it just turns to a slog to the summit. And that I had been on previously twice, but.
Interesting. So, did this, again, like this is this pretty big part of your story. It remains that way. Even though it's been a few years and you've done other things in other parts of the world. Did it move you? Did you have a realization of like a culmination, or was it like clipping the chains? You're like, okay, well, what's next? Like where were your feelings in the weeks after this thing that you did?
Yeah, totally. It for sure moved me. And, I'm obviously being on these, like pursuing these sort of solo climbs is vastly different than like sharing something with a partner. And both are, for me, like super special and just different. But I think that the style that I was able to pull off with that, like, was something that I felt like really proud of for myself, just because it sort of combined all these things, you know, like the soloing part, which is harder for me, you know, even though the climbing was easier, just that commitment of doing something alone. And then, yeah, being able to like use the skis as a tool, and then just like also move freely, and consistently. Like I love all those things. And so combining them all was like quite special. And yeah, I felt super proud of it for myself after.
Well, also, we're not mentioning that it took you just like between 14 and 15 hours, right?
Yeah.
Which is pretty fucking awesome.
Yeah, you're kind of like, okay, it's sweet to like, I definitely suffered up high. I was not as well acclimatized as I'd hoped to be, which seems to be the story every time I climb up high. But yeah, it was definitely like a bit of a mental thing to put my head down and grind through the schlag at the top. And so I was feeling pretty like tired after, but yeah, probably quite a lot less tired than I would have felt if I was out for days. So,
what about the sort of, you know, I like to ask people about the what next letdown that sometimes happens after the culmination of a big long-term thing that you had been thinking about for years. What did your climbing look like in the months, and your motivations look like in the months afterwards? I
mean, I've thought about that a lot, and like I think I'm very aware of that. That's like a real thing, and I try not to get like caught up in that. I kind of just try to like move on. I mean, there's a lot of things in life that I'm excited about, so I don't feel like it's like the only thing out there. And so I just try to immerse in things that like are important to me and stuff, you know, like whether that's like friends or family or just like doing completely other things outside of that. So I really make sure that I don't go down that like whole rabbit hole of like feeling like there's nothing else out there for me, or, you know, whatever, like I accomplished something I've been working on. Yeah. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. I just really try to not do that, but there's always things out there that I'm like looking forward to. So in a sense, it's like I will refocus my attention. But I do try to give myself space too. That's not always the case, but I try not to stack so much that it's like continuous, you know, just like go.
Yeah, I mean, that can be a trap. I've talked to plenty of people like Carl North on here that, you know, they woke up one day and were like, Jesus, I gotta like, you know, 2 expeditions a year or whatever for this many years. I'm like bone tired, exhausted.
Totally.
But that doesn't seem to be as much your game. But like, what do you look at that? I mean, you going on expeditions every year.
Yeah, like, well, so when I was supporting myself through like all this stuff, it seemed like my program was I'd go to the Himalaya every other year because that's what I could figure out financially. And then I still try to go to Alaska most years, just because obviously living in North America, it's a bit more of like a reasonable trip. It's not so expensive. Yeah. And then like once you have some support, you're like, oh, well, I can like do more. Right. And so I've tried to like really have an awareness of that. But yeah, it has seemed that I've gone to the Himalaya every year for like the last 4 years, which is different. This year I actually am taking a break, but I did do 2 trips last year to the Himalaya, which for me felt like I knew when I made that decision to do that it was going to probably be like it was going to probably like make me feel pretty like burnt out or tired. And it did in fact do that. And, and so this year and there was a lot to that, in that like when I came off the climb that I did with Fani in the fall, which we didn't finish yet. But we came awfully close. Like we were pretty depleted. Like we took it, you know, pretty far. And that actually took me, well, if I'm realistic, I probably just recovered from that, like in the last couple months. But
you put another trip in there.
Yeah, but that was a fun trip.
Okay,
like
cool.
That was like, yeah. And it was shorter and fun. That was like just pure not that these trips aren't fun, but there's just a high level of like commitment to the preparation and
what was the
everything.
pure fun trip?
My friend Jackson and I went to, and our friend Matt was supposed to come, but he had other things happen that he bailed on the trip for. But yeah, we went to an area in the Alaska Range that was like a little bit more removed from the busy places, and tried to climb or finish a route that Mark Westman started years ago. And then, yeah, we like skied out and pack rafted back to civilization, which was super fun.
Yeah, I mean we're at our time here, and like we just skipped like many expeditions, many awesome climbs, some failures or not failures, but some let's just call them recons. When you don't make it to the top.
Lots of those.
But one last thing I wanted to ask you about, and we'll like I said, with anybody like you, we have to skip around to all the different things that you've done. But you also did make a decision to go back into this being a supported or sponsored climber, however you want to look at it, at least ending that part of your career in Idaho. We talked earlier about a little bit of again, I use the word ambivalence, like, yeah, it would be cool to be a sponsored climber, but I'm not worthy, or, there is this other path that seems to fit with me or fit with me better. Like your friend Ann said, I saw in a video about her I'd rather just go on my own trips and pay for them. What was that decision? The opportunity rose. It looks like a good path for you to move back into this kind of pro world.
Yeah, or just move into it for the first time ever, but not. Yeah, I think there's a number of things there, but basically that opportunity sort of surfaced, and the plan has never been like, oh, I'm just gonna become a full-time athlete. But I still have been making alpine climbing and these expeditions and stuff like one of the priorities in my life, but also with that, like, I would say balance in my life is a priority as well. And, I come from like a lower middle class, like working family, and I've worked my whole life, and work is super important to me. And it's something that I'm actually going to continue to do, even though like I am grateful to have this support. But yeah, it sort of came at a time when I was like looking to transition out of this like really remote town of 50 people that I had to drive.
What was it called?
Loman.
What's it called? Loman. Yeah. When I read that, I'm like,
yeah.
No, I mean, Idaho for starters. And then you're like, Loman.
Yeah.
Have I heard of Loman?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, some people have, most people haven't. But yeah, it was like, that job really like sort of supported my lifestyle. And it was also like something that I was really into and I really liked. But I had to drive 2 hours to buy groceries or go to the post office, and rock climbing was not something that was accessible to me through that entire period of my life. And then, and I had to work really hard to like sort of maintain that stuff. And anyway, the opportunity kind of arose like at the right time where I could like sort of transition things and do this and sort of figure out, what like I want, the next chapter to look like. And so anyway, I'm kind of diving into new work stuff like in the avalanche consulting realm, and doing this as well at the moment for sure. But
when you're in your 20s and you were in Yosemite, and like, usually that's the time when your stoke level is just like it's burning, and it's like almost dangerous, in some ways. You've gone through all these experiences, and partners have come and gone. I'm sure we don't need to get into it, but that realm, you knew Kyle, you knew HK. So, heavy things happen. Like, what's your stoke level right now? I mean, what is like, how do you feel like compared to those younger years as you've matured, gotten a little older, had all these experiences?
Yeah, I mean, stoke level, like, definitely ebb and flows, right? Like these different events that happen, even like Michael Gardner's event, the loss of him last fall and stuff, or like any of the people you spoke about, like, I've I've given myself the space to like when I've needed to maybe not be psyched and whatnot, but the Stokes like always resurfaced. And so even this year, even though I had no big goals, it's like now that I've given myself that space, I'm like super psyched for what's to come next year. And I would say that my motivation is just as high as it ever has been. Or I mean, at some point it's going to shift, right? Like I imagine it has to, and like risk tolerance shifts, like our personal risk tolerance and our commitment to like being away from our lives for long periods of time and preparing for these things. I know that that's going to shift at some point, and I really hope I recognize like for myself when that happens so that I can like ease out of it gracefully. But I also 100% know that I'm not there yet.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Chantel for doing that. I think it hurt a little bit, but she got into it after a while. You can, of course, follow Chantel on Instagram at chantel.astorga, or just Google her to find out what's going on. She's moved to Tahoe. Like I said, she's now a sponsored climber, so hopefully that's going to provide some opportunities to really get some cool shit done. So I'd highly recommend following her. Okay. It is the holiday seasons. And guess what? Did you know that I have a little shop at enormocast.com and I sell some trinkets over there? Stickers and koozies, nice little, very inexpensive gifts for that Enormocast lover in your life. And of course, the holidays can be kind of rough for people. So it's a great time to watch out for everybody, look after each other, and of course, check your knots.
Dyscyplina ta uprawiana w stylu alpejskim jest szczególnie atrakcyjna i szczególnie wymagająca. Ja powiedziałbym, że te trawersy reprezentują sobą absolutną kwintesencję przygody górskiej. W czasie takich trawersów bardzo jesteśmy odcięci od cywilizacji, od otoczenia i w znacznie większym stopniu jesteśmy zdani na siebie samych.